Picture this. For decades, Florida was the promised land for American retirees. Sun-soaked beaches, zero state income tax, affordable living, the ultimate retirement dream. But in 2026, that dream is crumbling. And the data reveals something shocking. For the first time in modern history, more retirees are leaving Florida than moving in. The silver tsunami has reversed. And what's driving this exodus isn't just one factor. It's a perfect storm of financial devastation, environmental catastrophe, and quality-of-life collapse that's forcing seniors to abandon the Sunshine State entirely. This isn't speculation. This is happening right now. According to recent migration data, Florida cities that once topped retirement destination lists are now experiencing net outflows of older residents at rates not seen in decades. Fort Myers Beach saw a 21% decline in its 65-plus population. Naples, Sarasota, even parts of Tampa Bay are bleeding retirees. These aren't just numbers. These are real people who bet their life savings on the Florida dream, only to find themselves trapped in a nightmare of skyrocketing costs, relentless hurricanes, and insurance premiums that have quadrupled in 3 years. So what's really happening? Why are retirees who spent their entire careers dreaming of Florida now packing up and leaving? Where are they going instead? And most importantly, what does this demographic reversal mean for the broader housing market, for investors, and for anyone still considering Florida as a retirement destination? In this deep dive, we're breaking down the forces destroying Florida's retirement appeal, city by city, factor by factor. Hit subscribe to Housing Intel and ring that bell, because this is the kind of data-driven intelligence that could save you from making a catastrophic financial mistake. For over 50 years, Florida's population growth story was built on one rock-solid trend. Retirees from the Northeast, Midwest, and even California flooded into the state by the hundreds of thousands every single year. It was predictable. It was reliable. It fueled entire industries, from healthcare to hospitality to real estate development. But between 2023 and 2025, something unprecedented happened. That flow didn't just slow. It reversed. According to POD's moving data and U-Haul migration trends, Florida is now seeing net outflows in key retirement demographics for the first time since the 1970s. The over 65 population in several coastal counties actually declined year over year. Let that sink in. In a state where baby boomers were supposed to create an unstoppable silver tsunami, the wave is now moving in the opposite direction. Fort Myers Beach lost 21% of its retiree population. That's not a dip. That's a collapse. Naples, long considered one of the wealthiest retirement havens in America, is seeing seniors sell their properties at a pace 3 times higher than incoming buyers. This reversal isn't happening in isolation. It's concentrated in the very cities that once defined Florida retirement living. Sarasota, Venice, Port Charlotte, Cape Coral. These were the crown jewels. Now they're bleeding residents. And it's not just anecdotal. Census estimates and moving company data confirm the trend. Between January 2024 and December 2025, more than 70,000 retirees left Florida for other states. Meanwhile, only 52,000 moved in. That's an 18,000-person net loss in the demographic that built modern Florida. Why does this matter? Because retirees bring wealth. They bring stability. They don't burden school systems. They spend money locally. They drive demand for services, restaurants, entertainment, and especially real estate. When retirees leave, entire local economies start to crumble. Property values stagnate. Tax revenues drop. Businesses shutter. And the housing market, which bet everything on endless demand from older Americans, suddenly faces a reckoning it never prepared for. The silver tsunami was supposed to be Florida's economic engine for the next 30 years. Instead, it's evaporating. And the reasons why are brutal. If there's one single factor driving retirees out of Florida faster than anything else, it's insurance. Not just any insurance, homeowners insurance. And it's not rising gradually, it's exploding. In the last 3 years, average homeowners insurance premiums in Florida have more than tripled. Let me repeat that. Tripled. For many retirees on fixed incomes, this alone has made staying in Florida financially impossible. According to Insurify data, the average annual homeowners insurance premium in Florida now sits at $14,000 to $15,000. In high-risk coastal areas like Fort Myers Beach, Naples, and the Florida Keys, premiums routinely exceed $20,000 per year. Some properties are hitting $30,000. That's nearly $2,600 a month just for insurance. For retirees living on Social Security and modest retirement savings, that's devastating. It wipes out any tax advantage Florida once offered. It turns what was supposed to be affordable retirement into financial suffocation. But it gets worse. It's not just about cost, it's about availability. Over the last 2 years, 6 major insurance carriers have either left Florida entirely or stopped writing new policies in the state. Citizens Property Insurance, the state-backed insurer of last resort, has become the only option for hundreds of thousands of homeowners. And Citizens isn't cheap. It's expensive. And it's underfunded. If a major hurricane hits, there's legitimate concern Citizens could go insolvent, leaving policyholders with nothing. For retirees who bought homes in Florida a decade ago, this is a trap. They purchased properties assuming insurance would remain manageable. Now they're facing annual increases of 30 to 50%. Some have seen premiums double in a single renewal cycle. And there's no ceiling in sight. Insurance companies are pricing in climate risk, hurricane frequency, and catastrophic loss potential. That means premiums will continue rising year after year as long as environmental threats intensify. This isn't a temporary spike. It's structural. Florida's insurance market is fundamentally broken, and retirees, who need stability and predictability, are being forced to make an impossible choice. Pay insurance costs that consume 20 to 30% of their retirement income, or sell and leave. Increasingly, they're choosing to leave. Imagine spending your entire career saving for retirement, buying your dream home in Naples or Sarasota, only to watch your insurance premium go from $3,000 a year to $18,000 in less than 3 years. That's not retirement. That's financial devastation. And it's happening to tens of thousands of Florida retirees right now. Insurance premiums don't rise in a vacuum. They rise because the risk is real. And in Florida, that risk is climate change. Hurricanes are more frequent, they're more intense, and they're causing damage that makes the state increasingly unlivable for anyone who values peace, stability, and financial security. Hurricane Ian in 2022 was a wake-up call. It caused over $112 billion in damage, making it one of the costliest natural disasters in U.S. history. Fort Myers Beach was obliterated. Entire neighborhoods were wiped off the map. Then came Hurricane Idalia in 2023. Then Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton in 2024. The pattern is clear. Florida is getting hammered year after year with no relief in sight. For retirees, this isn't just about property damage. It's about quality of life. It's about evacuations. It's about living in constant fear every hurricane season. It's about spending weeks without power, dealing with FEMA claims, fighting with insurance companies, and watching their home equity evaporate as buyers flee storm-damaged markets. This is not the retirement anyone planned for, and it's not just hurricanes. Sea level rise is accelerating. Coastal flooding is becoming routine, even on sunny days. Saltwater intrusion is contaminating freshwater supplies in the Keys and parts of South Florida. Neighborhoods that were considered safe 10 years ago are now in flood zones. Properties that were insurable are now uninsurable. And the federal government's flood maps are being redrawn to reflect the new reality, pushing even more homes into high-risk categories. According to climate risk assessments, Florida coastal properties could lose 15 to 30% of their value by 2035 due to climate exposure alone. That's not a forecast. That's a warning based on current trajectory. Retirees who thought they were making a safe investment are now sitting on depreciating assets in increasingly dangerous locations. And unlike younger homeowners who can ride out volatility, retirees don't have time. They need to liquidate. They need stability. And Florida can no longer provide either. The environmental pressures aren't abstract future threats. They're present-day realities destroying the quality of life that once made Florida attractive. And retirees who moved to Florida for relaxation and enjoyment are finding themselves in a war zone every summer and fall. Even if you remove insurance and climate risk from the equation, Florida has simply become too expensive for average retirees. The cost of living has exploded across every category. Housing, healthcare, groceries, utilities, property taxes, HOA fees, infrastructure assessments. It all adds up to a financial burden that's crushing seniors on fixed incomes. Median home prices in popular retirement cities have soared. Naples now has a median home price over $600,000. Sarasota is approaching $550,000. Even formerly affordable inland cities like the Villages and Ocala have seen prices jump 40 to 50% since 2020. For retirees selling homes in the Midwest or Northeast, the math used to work. Sell a home for $300,000, buy in Florida for $250,000, pocket the difference. Not anymore. Now they're selling for $400,000 and buying in Florida for $500,000. The arbitrage is gone. And it's not just home prices. Property taxes in Florida, despite the homestead exemption, are rising as municipalities struggle with infrastructure costs. Many counties are raising millage rates to fund storm recovery, beach renourishment, seawall construction, and drainage improvements. In Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties, property tax bills have increased by double digits in the last 2 years. For retirees, that's another unexpected cost eating into fixed budgets. Then there's health care. Florida ranks near the bottom nationally for health care affordability and access. Medicare Advantage plans in the state have high premiums and limited networks. Prescription drug costs are higher than the national average. And for retirees with chronic conditions, out-of-pocket medical expenses can easily exceed $10,000 to $15,000 annually. Combined with housing and insurance costs, it creates a financial vice that's unbearable. HOA fees in many retirement communities have also skyrocketed. Communities that once charged $200 a month are now charging $500 to $800. Special assessments for hurricane damage, roof replacements, and infrastructure repairs are becoming routine. In some condo buildings hit by new Florida building safety laws post-Surfside collapse, owners are facing special assessments of $50,000 to $100,000 per unit. For retirees on fixed incomes, that's catastrophic. The narrative that Florida is an affordable retirement destination is dead. It was true in the 1990s. It was even true in the 2000s. But in 2026, Florida is one of the most expensive states in the country For retirees, when you factor in total cost of living, insurance, and climate risk, and seniors are doing the math, they're realizing they can live better, safer, and cheaper somewhere else. If you're watching this and rethinking your retirement plans, you're not alone. Subscribe to Housing Intel for weekly breakdowns on where the real opportunities are hiding. So if retirees are leaving Florida, where are they going? The data reveals surprising new hotspots that are quietly absorbing Florida's exodus. And these destinations share common traits: lower cost of living, manageable insurance rates, less climate risk, better healthcare infrastructure, and in many cases, more attractive tax structures than retirees realized. The Carolinas are the biggest winners. North Carolina and South Carolina have seen massive inflows of retirees leaving Florida. Cities like Asheville, Greenville, Charleston, and the Research Triangle are booming with older transplants. Why? Moderate climate without hurricane frequency, lower property costs, reasonable insurance premiums, access to world-class healthcare through Duke, UNC, and MUSC. And both states offer partial tax exemptions on retirement income. For many retirees, the Carolinas deliver everything Florida promised, without the catastrophic downsides. The Midwest is also gaining. Cities like Grand Rapids, Michigan, Madison, Wisconsin, and even parts of Ohio are seeing reverse migration. Retirees who left the Midwest for Florida are coming back. Why? Family proximity, lower cost of living, stable housing markets. And frankly, they'd rather deal with snow a few months a year than hurricanes, insurance nightmares, and financial ruin. The Mountain West is another surprise destination. Colorado, Utah, and parts of Arizona are attracting Florida refugees. Yes, these states have their own challenges, but for active retirees, the appeal is clear. Outdoor lifestyle, lower humidity, more predictable weather. And in cities like Boulder, Boise, and Tucson, there are thriving communities of older residents who prioritize quality of life over beach access. Even the Northeast is seeing inflows. Retirees are moving back to Connecticut, Rhode Island, and upstate New York. States they once fled for tax reasons are now looking attractive again. Why? Because when you factor in Florida's insurance costs, property taxes, and cost of living, the tax advantage disappears. And northeastern states offer better healthcare, better infrastructure, and crucially, no hurricane risk. Retirees are also choosing smaller, less-known markets. Cities like Knoxville, Tennessee, Chattanooga, Lexington, Kentucky. These mid-sized cities offer affordability, culture, healthcare, and stability. They're not flashy, but for retirees who've been burned by Florida's broken promises, boring and stable suddenly sounds pretty good. The shift is real, and it's accelerating. According to Moving Data, the top destinations for former Florida retirees in 2025 were Charlotte, North Carolina, Nashville, Tennessee, Greenville, South Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, and Raleigh, North Carolina. Notice a pattern? They're all in the Southeast, close enough to visit Florida occasionally, but far enough to avoid the chaos. This redistribution of retirement wealth is reshaping regional economies. Cities that were never on the retirement radar are suddenly building senior housing, expanding healthcare facilities, and marketing themselves as the new Florida. And it's working. Because Florida's brand, built over 50 years, is collapsing under the weight of its own failures. The reversal of Florida's silver tsunami isn't just a demographic curiosity. It's an economic earthquake with ripples that will be felt for decades. And if you're invested in Florida real estate or considering buying, you need to understand what's coming. First, housing demand in Florida is about to face sustained downward pressure. Retirees have been the most reliable source of housing demand in the state for half a century. They buy. They don't sell quickly. They stabilize neighborhoods. When that demographic exits, demand craters. We're already seeing early signs. Inventory in Southwest Florida markets has doubled year over year. Days on market are stretching past 90 days in cities where homes used to sell in a week. Price cuts are routine. In Fort Myers, Cape Coral, and Punta Gorda, over 60% of active listings have reduced their asking prices. This is just the beginning. As more retirees decide Florida isn't viable, the selling pressure will intensify. And who's going to buy? Not other retirees. They're leaving too. Not young families. They can't afford it. Not investors. They're getting crushed by insurance and seeing negative cash flow on rental properties. The buyer pool is shrinking while inventory grows. That's the recipe for a prolonged correction. Second, Florida's state budget is going to feel the pain. Retirees bring wealth but don't burden schools or social services. They're ideal residents from a fiscal perspective. When they leave, tax revenues drop. Sales tax revenues decline. Property tax revenues stagnate as home values correct. And the state still has to fund hurricane recovery, infrastructure maintenance, and climate adaptation. That gap will widen, and eventually, Florida will face a choice: cut services or raise taxes. Either way, residents lose. Third, local economies dependent on retiree spending will contract. Restaurants, golf courses, entertainment venues, health care providers, home services. All of these industries built business models assuming endless growth in the retirement population. When that growth reverses, businesses fail. Jobs disappear, and entire communities that were built around retiree wealth face economic decline. Fourth, this exodus will reshape the national housing market. As Florida demand cools, other markets will heat up. The Carolinas, Tennessee, parts of the Midwest. These regions will see price appreciation, new construction booms, and economic growth fueled by incoming retirees. Capital will flow out of Florida and into these emerging markets. For investors paying attention, this is a generational reallocation opportunity. Fifth, Florida's political and cultural identity could shift. Retirees have been a dominant voting bloc in the state for decades. As they leave, younger, more diverse populations will fill the gap. That changes everything: policy priorities, infrastructure spending, climate adaptation strategies. Florida in 2035 will look very different than Florida in 2015, and not in ways current residents expect. The silver tsunami reversal is not a blip. It's a structural shift with profound implications for real estate markets, state economies, and retirement planning across the entire country. And if you're still clinging to the idea that Florida is the retirement dream, the data is screaming at you to wake up. Let's be clear, Florida isn't going to become a ghost state. It will still attract some retirees. It will still have beautiful beaches. But the era of Florida as the undisputed automatic retirement destination for middle-class and upper-middle-class Americans, that era is over. The math doesn't work. The risk is too high, and the quality of life has deteriorated to the point where the sacrifices required to live there no longer make sense. For retirees still in Florida, the question is simple: can you afford to stay? Not just this year, but in 5 years when insurance premiums are even higher, when the next hurricane hits, when property values have declined another 15%? If the answer is no, the time to sell is now, while there are still buyers willing to pay. For retirees considering Florida, the answer is even simpler. Don't. Not unless you have significant wealth, can absorb catastrophic losses, and are prepared for declining quality of life. There are better options. Safer options, more affordable options, and the data proves it. For investors, the message is urgent. Florida real estate, especially in coastal retirement markets, is facing a prolonged correction. Demand is weakening. Supply is growing. Insurance costs are crushing cash flow. And the demographic engine that powered decades of appreciation has reversed. If you're holding Florida properties as long-term investments, it's time to reevaluate. The silver tsunami was real. It shaped Florida for 50 years. But in 2026, the tide has turned. And those who ignore this reversal will pay the price. If this breakdown opened your eyes, smash that like button right now. Subscribe to Housing Intel for data-driven real estate intelligence that cuts through the hype and shows you where the real opportunities are. And drop a comment below. Are you a retiree who left Florida? Are you reconsidering your plans? We want to hear your story. Because this isn't just about data. It's about real people making the biggest financial decisions of their lives. And we're here to make sure you have the intelligence you need to make the right call. We'll see you in the next video, where we reveal the markets that are actually worth your retirement dollars.